Hello, I'm Kim DeStefano. I'm a transformation and meditation coach. Thank you for taking the time out to come and be with me today. And the topic of conversation today is going to be about releasing patterns that no longer serve us. And when I refer to patterns, what I'm talking about is that we all have different patterns that we have, or patterns that we're running. So we might have patterns of thinking. We all have patterns of thinking and emotion. We have energetic patterns as well as patterns of habit. And when we look at some of these patterns, we can see that these patterns that we're running or having really aren't helping us any. They're not really creating the kind of life experiences we're wanting to have, or the feelings within us that we're wanting to have, or the outcomes that we're trying to make manifest. So what I'm going to help try to suggest for you today is to really start to let go of the patterns that aren't really working for you anymore. And to know that a lot of these patterns that we have weren't really something that we consciously cultivated. It was something that kind of came about maybe from the life that we were living, or habits of thinking, or habits that we've just developed over time. And just because we weren't conscious at the time when we were creating them, we can be conscious about them now. And the value of becoming conscious about them now is we now have the ability to look at them and then start to decipher, this one's working, this one's not. You know, these are thoughts that are creating negative emotions that are hurting me in some way. So I'm going to stop these patterns of thinking, stop these patterns of emotions, and really start to let them go. And some of the ways that we can do it is first that we start to really acknowledge them. We start to look at them. So instead of just sort of allowing them to keep running, you know, you're driving along and you have these streams of thinking, and you know, they're kind of the regular thought patterns. You can stop and you can just watch them to start off with. You start to observe. They call it observing your thoughts. And there is power in that. It takes practice, so be patient with that. Meditation's another great way to start to develop the habit and the practice of observing your patterns. But you could just do it while you're driving, and you can observe what you're thinking. You can, okay, so you're watching this happen, you're watching these thoughts, and you can start to say, okay, are these thoughts helping me? Are they moving me forward? Are they creating a feeling in my body that I'm wanting to have? Are these a series of stressful thoughts, negative thoughts, worrisome thoughts? And you can really start to watch them and start to say, okay, these are thought patterns I don't want to have anymore, or I don't want to keep supporting them or believing in them. And then you start, one of the good ways to do it is you start to observe them, and then you start to stop believing in them. And that's the next thing, because a thought is just a thought, and it doesn't have any real power until we start giving our belief in it. Somebody could think, oh, what a crappy day. But they're saying it, and you could tell that they're saying it, but they're not really feeling that. As opposed to when somebody else says, oh, this is a really crappy day. And you could tell and you could feel that they're believing what they're saying. And so they're believing the thought, and then now that thought has power. So first we observe, then we disconnect our belief in them, because our minds can be just full of crap, really. The thoughts that we're thinking aren't always based on truth. They're just habitual thinking. And sometimes in societies too, we can pick up on thoughts that are in the environment. So if people around you are negative, you can like pick up on their negativity and the negative thought patterns, or and then they don't affect you unless you start to entertain them yourself, as you pick them up and start to believe in them, and then you start thinking them, and then you have more thoughts that are like that, and it just sort of becomes an energy field within itself, and it doesn't really help us any. So so observe, take away the belief in it, so then you take your power away from it, and then you start to after you disbelieve it too, then you start to cultivate different thoughts. You're like, oh, okay, I've had this thought 1,000 times. I don't even know if it's based on truth, and maybe even it has been based on truth of the past. It doesn't have to be my truth in the future. And so then you could start to really kind of negotiate within yourself, like, oh, that's not a thought, that's not even something that's going to be true for me anymore. So I'm going to think a different kind of thoughts. and then you start to cultivate, consciously cultivating the kind of thoughts that you're going to have. And a good way to do that is to start to think of what are the kind of thoughts I would need to have to be the kind of person I'm choosing to be. And that's a great way to cultivate the next sets of thought patterns, because when you're doing that, you're going to consciously create them, because we're thinking beings. We do spend a great deal of our time thinking. We're not maybe always conscious of what we're thinking, and we're not always feeling like we're in control of what we're thinking, but we can actually become aware of the thoughts and then consciously create new thoughts, so that if your mind's going to be thinking, it might as well be thinking the thoughts you want it to think. And then you start to become more deliberate with that. And it takes time and it takes practice, and you'll notice that in the beginning it might be a little bit difficult to do, because those thoughts have momentum, and they're kind of the thought process, the thought patterns are really kind of depending on your attention to them to keep going. So it seems like it's sort of a strange way to talk about it, but if you're running thought patterns of like maybe worry or stress or frustration, and these are very typical patterns for you that you run on the daily, they can keep coming back because you're allowing them, and you're believing in them, and you're supporting them with your attention and your belief in them. And the best way to stop thinking that is to observe them, be aware consciously of what you're thinking, take away the belief you have in it, and take away your attention from it. And then once your attention's away from it, and consciously put your attention on what you're trying to cultivate, the thoughts you're wanting to cultivate, the patterns that you're wanting to establish, then the old structures and the old patterns will start to break and collapse, and the new patterns will come into place. But while you do that, it can be very uncomfortable, because that's a pattern that's been running so long, it wants to continue to run. And you'll have to try to disengage from that momentum and that stream of thinking, and to cultivate a different set of thinking and start to develop some momentum with that. So if you could start to cultivate much more empowering thought processes, maybe ones of appreciation, or of like let's say you're trying to make a transformation in your life in some level, and you want to have some experiences of traveling. What is the kind of thoughts you would have to be somebody who gets to go on travel on the regular basis? And then you start to think, okay, ask your mind the question, like, what are the thoughts I would have to be a regular traveler? And then you'll start to come up with new sets of thinking, and then you'll start to cultivate the potential. You'll start to create the potential for the traveling through your thought processes. And it will feel almost like it's not true in the beginning, but you'll start to create new thoughts. And then the more thoughts you think, and you keep thinking them, you kind of create an opening, and then opening them becomes a potential reality for you. And at some point, when you think the thoughts enough and they have enough momentum, then you're going to start to be able to walk through some of these potentials that you're creating through your thinking. But it really is a great way to start with your thought process. One of the ways that we can do it is sort of really letting go of the patterns that aren't really serving us anymore. So I can help you with that. I've created a different series of meditations, some transformational meditations that you can get on my website at yourtransformationisart.com. There's a link at the bottom. I can also work with you one-on-one as a coaching client or a consulting client. And then I also have daily meditations, and the daily meditations are set up like once in the morning and once in the evening, and that's really to sort of help set the tone of your day, and then kind of set the tone of the evening to let go of the day and sort of go into appreciation and set up for a good night's sleep. And that's there for you to help you in this process and to help you in the journey, because everything that I'm trying to do is to help you have a life that has value and meaning to you. And the best way to do that is for you to really learn to manage your mind, because our mind can create a heaven on earth, or it can create, chaos or hurt or pain or suffering. And a lot of that comes from our perceptions and how we're thinking and the experiences that we're having, and our perception of the experiences that we're having. Because I've met people who have wonderful sets of circumstances, but their mind is setting themselves up to be really unhappy in life. And I've met people who have had circumstances that are far less than desirable, but their mind is set up in a way where they're really experiencing joy in their living. So when we start to say, okay, this is our mind, it's my mind, and I'm going to consciously create the thoughts that I'm thinking, because my mind is my tool, and I'm going to use it as a tool instead of allowing the mind to kind of run its own sets of patterns. And you start to take back control of that, and then you'll be able to really start to create the life that you're wanting to have for yourself. So that is my encouragement and my talk for the day. Much warmth and much love, and good luck to you on your journey, and I wish you the absolute best. Thank you.